Welcome, Sri Mahabir, to the show. And I am so looking forward to talking with you. You're just such a light, a little bit of sunshine in my day. And I can't wait to hear about you and your story. Can you give us a little bit of a picture of who you are right now in this moment in time?
This moment in time, I'm relaxed. I still have levels of anxiety and doubt, but it wasn't like this all the time. It was more powerful where it got to a point where I had to stop and just sit with it because I didn't know how to control it. And now I have a better understanding of myself and my capabilities. I also am at a place where I have an agency and I'm actually really pushing it because last year or even 3 years ago, I would never have dreamed that I would have an agency where I am producing podcasts, producing live streaming shows with a team, and people are recognizing that I do live streaming. And having this understanding, you consistently do one thing over and over again, it does pay off. When I used to think, "Oh, I gotta try this and I gotta try that." Now I'm to the point where I understand, no, just do this one thing. This is who you're known for and see how far it can take you. Also, I'm enjoying the process even more. So many times we hate the process, from working out to building the business to even starting a podcast show. It's all a process. You figure out what's working, you figure out what's not working, you tweak it. Even as somebody as seasoned as myself, I can always improve the process. There's never a time where I'll say, I don't think I want to try that. I think about it and I think, could this really make an impact? At this point, I can say, will this make an impact or will it not? 'Cause if it's not going to make an impact, I look at it and then I implement it later when I know that I can say, hey, this suggestion was given to me. Let's see how we can put it into action. Versus in the beginning, I would be like, I got to implement that. I got to implement that.
Yeah. So that's really interesting that you mentioned that. It's almost like two different ideas, loving the process, but yet also having the experience to know ahead of time things that aren't going to work.
Yeah, and you don't know that in the beginning because you're like a sponge. You're trying to figure out what is going to work and you're going to implement. Even now, I'm still trying to think, how can I make something work? It might take me longer to implement it, but I have already understood that I'm going to take that action. I remember the first time somebody that I interviewed said that we are quick to make a decision, but we take time to implement the strategy because we're trying to see, how does this work? And so if you've made the decision that you're going to do it, you're going to do it no matter what. It's just now, okay, how can I do it? So, for example, you want to start working out. You've made the decision you're going to work out. Now it's, how can I make it possible that every day, or I work out 3 times a week consistently? So it could be that you start with a 5-minute walk or a 1-minute walk, and it leads up to this full on working out at the gym with your sets and your rhythm. But if we rush into it, because I know I've done it too many times, you don't get it. It doesn't just happen. You
Mhm.
fall off. And that's why I say, I have made the decision that I'm going to do it. It's now a matter of, how can I make it work? Do I need to
Mm.
hire somebody? Do I need to subtract some things that I'm doing? Those activities are not actually pushing my business.
Yeah. So you get to make those intentional decisions. And so you jumped right in with talking about how you're much more calm, that you've gotten in control of some anxiety that you might have had throughout your life. So I'm really curious about that because you're talking now about being so intentional, having experience, knowing the importance of repetition and consistency. So it sounds to me like this was a lifelong process of learning how to get to that place. Am I right?
I would say it was a lifelong process, but it really started in 2019. I had
Okay.
hit a wall and I really was not in a good place. And I thought that with life, like, for example, there was somebody that I was dating or trying to date. And then there was the passing of my ex in 2018, November. So there was just a lot that was happening. And that's when I realized I need to get help for this. I
Okay.
really need to talk to somebody. And I started working with a therapist who then introduced me to listening to Brene Brown and even some of this stuff she had me listening to made me laugh, but they were helpful. For example, Hoe Tactics. It's a book written by a man who helps women understand how to approach a man and talk to him. And I even would listen to this other gentleman who's big on dating, Matthew Hussey, and I would implement all of these. I was also doing food delivery. So I was listening to Soulful Conversations with Oprah Winfrey and then all of this. And it was the talk with Eckhart Tolle that really
Mhm.
opened my mind to understand this journey of working on your mindset. It is like you're working out and realizing that there is moments where you feel like you want to give up. You just so hard and so painful. But when you look back, you realize, oh my gosh, like I'm actually lifting 120 pounds. I'm actually lifting some heavy layers off of what I'm peeling off of. So that was like the opening of, okay, this is the start. And then in 2020, I worked with a coach in a program where we looked at our trauma because we were all locked up in our house in
Yeah.
2020. So I
Yeah.
took that time to really focus on healing the trauma and the relationship with my family, my mom and dad, and my
Okay.
my daughter. And then came 2021 where I started working with a mindset coach. And in 2022, I really worked with mindset coach and
Mm.
really digging deep. What are these family stories? What are these
Yeah.
patterns
Great.
that I am carrying on over and over again? And it wasn't until the end, almost the end of 2022, that I saw a pattern in
Hmm.
myself.
Great.
And my mindset coach at the time was like, "This is you.
Yeah.
You continue to do the same thing." And I realized I was
Yeah.
getting in my way.
Yeah. This is exactly why I'm doing this because this is how I think of it. All of the answers, all of them are in our stories. So let's go back because you've just given us a whole lot of things that we can talk about in context. So let's get the context. Going back, tell us where you were born and just start out from the very beginning at that time. What was going on?
Where was I born?
Yeah. Where were you born?
I was born in New Orleans,
Okay.
and my parents lived there for a few years, and then we moved around, and then we went to the next stop was Richland, Washington. Then we went to Miami because there was a point where my dad and my mom couldn't afford to live. My dad had lost his job and he had to get a new job. So it was just a lot of transition. And so it was best. We went to Miami for 6 months. And then after that, we moved to Mobile, Alabama, then to Augusta, Georgia, and then to Birmingham.
Wow.
And then we
So
came to
all around the
Houston,
South.
all around the South, because my dad was an engineer and he worked for a lot of oil and gas companies. So
Okay.
that's where oil and gas is all in the South.
Yes.
And we moved to Houston and I've lived in Houston until 99 and then I left and I was in Maryland and then I went to Florida. I stayed there for 10 years. And then when I had my daughter and she started going to school, I was alone and I didn't want to stay alone with my
Mm,
daughter. It's just really hard maintaining it all.
yeah.
And I wanted more stability. So I
Right.
did go to Houston and I came back to Miami. So I got remarried and
Okay.
marriage didn't work out. And
Okay.
I came back to Houston. I said, I'm not going to leave. I'm going to
All
let
right.
her, she's going to stay here
Wow.
or
Yeah.
stay with
So
my
that's,
parents.
yes. Oh my goodness. Let's put some of those puzzle pieces together. So when you were a little girl, you were born in New Orleans. And then how long did you stay in New Orleans before you started this massive kind of traveling all around?
I think we were 2 or 3 when we left.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it
Um,
was about 4 maybe, 2
okay.
to 4, but I know we left and then we lived in Richland, Washington for a while,
Okay. Do you have any
and then
memories of that early time up until about age 4? Any very early memories?
no, not really.
So you don't remember being in New Orleans at all?
No.
You just know that you lived there.
I was born there and I lived there, and then Richland, Washington is when I started having memories. I
Okay.
remember living in an apartment, and I fell and broke my arm off of the little in the playground, they had these little
Uh,
statues that you could ride and stuff.
oh, with, like, the ones on a spring? Like
Yes,
the little those like the horse or the hippopotamus on a spring?
yes, and I fell off of one of them and broke my arm, and then we moved to a house, which I thought was super big, and it had 3 levels, and then we left that, and then we moved to Mobile, Alabama, where I remember we were in Miami for a few months. We lived with my aunt and uncle, and then I remember we had a hurricane because it was hurricane season.
Okay.
And then we went to Mobile, Alabama, where I remember we lived in a two-story townhome and going to school, and then we left.
So
And
you kept coming and going from schools at this time. How did that feel?
it was weird. I hated it because I was like, I always have to make new friends and I always have to figure out stuff. And the moment that I would get comfortable making a friend, we would be leaving.
That must have been really hard.
It was, but I also could imagine for my mom and dad, it was difficult, especially my mom. I think about it, like, she always had to make new friends, and if it was hard for me, I could imagine for her how it was, but when we moved to Birmingham, I thought we were gonna be there for a while because we were there for over close to 2 years before we left.
So you'd really established. How old were you then?
I was about 11.
Do you remember any stories from that time of your life?
The stories are that I wanted to do dancing, and my parents weren't open to that, but also my mom didn't drive at that time,
Oh,
so she
wow.
couldn't pick me up. It was very difficult. They were very against it, regardless of how much I wanted to. I did do Indian classical dancing, and all of that came to a stop when my brother passed away because we left. That's why we left Birmingham,
Ugh.
otherwise we would've stayed.
All
But
right.
we left because he passed away, and we're just like, "Okay." So, my dreams of dance I'd always liked dancing, but I just didn't wanna continue after he passed away,
Can you
and
tell
then
us the
I
story of what happened with your brother?
he was murdered
Oh my gosh.
by his friend. It was really interesting. His friend, they were young. He was the person that murdered him was 16, my brother was 14, and I came home and I found my brother, and
Whoa. Oh my gosh. It
so that
happened
was
at your house?
yes, it was an apartment. It was a series of things that happened. And the week of his birthday is when or not his birthday, is the week he died, is when things were weird. Like one day this gentleman, he's not a gentleman, this young guy comes to our house, friend, and then he wants to I think at that time he was trying to kill him, but he didn't because he hit
Wow.
him with the bat behind his head.
Oh my gosh.
And prior to that, so the series starts like this. The month before, my brother was just acting really weird. We learned later he was always being chased in the woods because there were some woods nearby.
Okay.
And then what happened the week of, my brother saw when he went to go get a haircut, he saw this guy stealing. So he was running and he hurt himself. Then that Wednesday is when he came over, the guy came over and wanted to do something to my brother. I had this feeling. I was like, I was with his sister. I was like, I don't feel right. We need to go home. When we walked in, I was like, what are you doing? You need to leave.
So you
And
knew this kid?
I knew the kid, I knew his sister. And then came Thursday, and Home Alone was having their opening night. Like you could get a preview. So
Okay.
I went to it, and my mom said that this guy came over and my brother looked really scared. And then Friday, I remember when I was leaving, my brother came out to say bye to me, and I was like, "That's just weird." But I didn't really think too much of it, and I said, "Okay, bye." And then when I came home, the door was open. I was like, "What's going on? Something's not right." And I look and there's blood on the window. There's blood that had been because he was dragged to his room and he was put on the bed, but my brother had rolled off the bed. So when I found him, he was on the floor and I kept hearing a noise, but I never went into the room until later. And then I went and got help, called 911, and got, he died later that evening. And so that's when we moved to Houston, and my mom just was like, "We're gonna stay here." So I've been in Houston since '91. Now in '99, I left because my aunt was like, "Come to college here in Miami." I had a abusive boyfriend before I left, so finally '99, I decided, "Okay, it's time to leave."
So
And
after your brother's murder, you with the family moved to Houston. And what age were you then?
I was 11.
You were 11 years old. And you stayed in Houston through your teenage years?
Right, I was about 19
Okay.
when before I left, and
So
I
tell
went to
us.
college here.
Okay. So from 11 on, how did you deal with this when you first got to Houston? How did you deal with it?
I don't think I dealt with it very I was a kid, I was resilient. There
Yeah.
was a lot going on. I was insecure for a long time, but I just went with it. Like, I didn't really talk to many people because you just deal with it,
So
kind
your
of.
parents were thinking, if we can just start over.
I don't know if what they were thinking, to be honest. I didn't really ask too many questions. I just made the most of the situation.
So you didn't
And
talk about it in your family.
no, nobody talked about it for a very long time. For a very long time, nobody talked about it.
Did you ever find out why? The
He was just his mom was living the life of giving a better life for her children. She was working 2 jobs. She had moved them from a bad neighborhood to where we lived, which was a better neighborhood, and she couldn't be there for her kids all the time, but she was doing her best.
This
He
was
has
the boy who killed your brother's mom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and as far as the thought process of the mother is give the best life, put them in good schools, and work hard to make it happen. The sister was on board with the program that the mom had, but the brother,
Mm.
he had his own thought process. He was still carrying with him, I'm going to be the man of the town. And he was carrying that mentality in his mindset. So he was bullying other kids.
Mm.
And he actually had said he was going to kill at least one of there was like a circle of friends, and it just happened that it was my brother that got killed, but one of the other kids could have been. It could have been happened. Because it's when I was at the hearing that I saw and heard the truth that what this guy was doing. And then he was still in prison for a very long time. I had to go for the parole hearing,
Mm.
and during the parole hearing, I learned he's never changed.
He's still
He's
just not a good person.
still trying to do the same mentality. And then when it was time for his release, from what I understand, he passed away, and I don't know how, because there's all we read are obituaries.
Okay. So he died.
He died somehow, I don't know.
And wanted to he just wanted to kill someone. It's really basically what you got from it. He just wanted to somehow control the group,
It's
terrorize. That's what his definition of being a man was.
I believe so.
Yeah. Wow, he must have had a lot of pain to want to inflict that type of pain on other people.
I have no idea why he thought that was the thought process, to be honest. Nobody
Crazy.
no, we don't we don't just get born into this world and we're gonna kill people. There's a
No,
reason, right?
there's
Either it's seen or it's been taught. I don't even know what happened with his own father.
no, yeah. You can only speculate, and we don't know what's going on in someone else's mind, but for someone to get to that extreme, that's it's hard to understand.
It is, especially since even when I went to the parole hearing and I saw his mother and sister, they were still quite in remorse. It's as if they had lost their own child or brother. They still had him there.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So your family moved to Houston and tried to pick up the pieces and start a new life, but you didn't deal with it as a family. There was no discussion.
No, there was no discussion. And then, so my brother passed away in November, and then my grandmother, which is my mom's mom, passed away in February because of this.
Oh,
She couldn't handle it. She actually had a heart attack. And then they were trying to do a bypass surgery for her in February and it didn't work. So it was a lot for my mom and the family because first he passed away and
and then your
grandma,
mom.
then my mom's mom passed away.
Oh,
So in that year 91 we went to India and all the brothers and sisters were together. So it was good that my mom had that support because I remember we lived in Houston and the day that she had passed away, we had just met some people. We didn't even know them that well, but my mom really liked them, and we had them over, and, like, my mom knew something was up. Even I knew. I was like, "Why are they here? And why do they look so sad?" And they were there to be because as my dad was telling my mom, they were there to support her.
so your dad got the news
Yeah.
and he knew these friends who he thought could be support, try
Yeah.
to bring them in to help.
Yeah.
So your grandmother was in India when she passed away,
Yes. She
and
was
then
in
you took a trip.
Yes. So that summer, we all decided that we would go because they have to do some rituals. And I'm a kid, so from my understanding, it was just we needed to do this.
Yeah.
And we went, and all of us were there together. At least all of the brothers and sisters were all there together
Your
for their
mom's
parents.
brothers and sisters.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just like, okay.
Is it a big family?
My mom has 5 there's 5 of them, so 3 sisters, 2 brothers, and it was nice to see everybody, but it was a bad like, we didn't wanna be there for that, and
Yeah.
it ended up my grandfather moved in with my mom's elder brother,
Okay.
and he was there until he passed away.
Wow. So are all these relatives in India or some of them in the US?
Most of them are here, 2
Okay.
of them are still in India.
So you
1
have some
travels back and forth.
okay. So you have some family. Do you have cousins
Yes, I have a
around
lot
your
of
age?
cousins. My mom's elder sister has been here, like, her 2 kids were born here. They're older than me, and those are the ones I grew up with. My dad has had there was 4 of them, and 2 of them passed away, but their kids, everybody is here. Nobody's in India.
So at least you had some family in the area to help at least give you some connection with people?
They did. So, for example, after my brother passed away, I would go visit my cousins in Miami. I'm still close to one of them. And I was there for Christmas, spring break, summer. That was a cousin. It was always Miami. So Miami has always been home. Miami
Okay.
will always be home for me. Ever since I was 2 weeks old, 2 to 3, like a baby, I've been going to Miami. So
Okay.
Miami's always been, and then I lived there for 10 years. So home is always going to be Miami. My daughter was born there.
Okay. So then when you got to Houston, you were there from 11 to 19. Do you have any stories from that time of your life, the teenage time? You said you got involved with an abusive boyfriend. And I'm sure that in the aftermath of your brother's passing and then your grandmother's passing, there was a lot going on internally that you had to work through. What was your teenage years? What were your teenage years like?
A lot of what I remember It's not feeling I fit in anywhere, and a lot of feeling I don't change because I was low to openness when I look at the big 5
Oh, yeah.
personalities, and understanding that I wanted to feel the victim. I liked because my parents didn't have a great relationship, so this is why when I looked at the relationships I was in younger, that I was always falling for what was comfortable to me, and I didn't understand it at that time, but that's because my parents weren't in a healthy relationship, and then here I am trying to figure it all out. I was trying to fit in. I was just trying to find me,
Mhm.
and even some of the friends that I had in high school, I'm questioning, like, "Why did I well, why would I be their friend?" And but I what I did find during that time was I loved volunteering. And I loved going to the CPS, Children's Protective Services, and I was able to go and volunteer. We would play games with them, bring them cake, and so I felt a somewhat okay, they understand me and I understand them, even though in my circumstances, I wasn't getting abused. I remember I even had a friend in there, and then I when I left, I always thought about it because even when I was younger what my dad did was there was a temple holding the ashes of my brother. So, as what they asked was, "Okay, we will hold it, but we want you to take this food and deliver it to and serve the homeless." So, I was doing that with my dad too. Every Sunday, he did that. So
Mhm.
then there was the Sundays that I would go volunteer at CPS, and then I carried that with me. When I moved to Miami, I didn't have access to CPS, but I would go to the homeless shelter or I would try to help. It was really crazy that more people were helping me because I needed it. I was trying
Yeah.
to figure it out.
Do you think there is something about you're caring for other people who are in a similar situation as children that you are caring for yourself,
Yes, very much.
like your child self?
Yes, I didn't know it. So at the time I was just like, this is just where I feel comfortable.
Yeah.
I remember even my ex, who is the father of my daughter, he was very abusive to me.
Was
My
this
first
the person you met as a teenager?
no,
Okay. This is a
I
different
never the first gentleman I dated, so let me rewind back for the listeners
Okay.
thinking so in college, when graduated high school, going into college, I did date a man who I met and he was abusive and I stayed in it. He was abusive and he cheated on me and I had to leave because it got so bad. My family was like, "You need to leave him." And I
So you
did.
this is in college. Was he another college student?
No, he wasn't. He was
He was
much older than
an
me,
older person. Okay.
older person, and manipulating my mindset. I allowed it. I allowed all of this. I'm not blaming him, but I allowed this into my life because this is what I was used to. As much as I come from an educated family within my ecosystem at the time, this is what I saw was what is okay and it's not.
Was
So
it
that
something in your parents' relationship, you think?
I think they just weren't healthy. They were arguing, but I don't know the extent of
Okay.
everything.
Yeah.
And so I learned later the reason you stay in an abusive relationship because it's
Yeah.
and what you is comfortable. So then I left Houston and I left him and I went to Miami eventually. And then I met my daughter's father, my ex-husband. And towards after I had my daughters, when he got really abusive
Oh boy.
and it
So
got really bad.
you were in 2 abusive relationships. Did you graduate from college?
I did.
And
I
the
had to because in
yeah.
my mind, I was like, this isn't going to work. Because even that was a whole story. Leaving him was a whole I had to make up in my mind, if I leave him, I'm never going back, and I decided not to go back to him, and I had to leave without my daughter and come back for my daughter, and then eventually, it got so bad with him, he was stalking me, and he cut the wiring under my engine that
Oh
he
my
had
gosh.
to
All right.
He
So
ended
let's
up getting
Oh my gosh. All right, let's go back a little because this is a story we need to hear. This will help a lot of people. So you were in college, involved with an older guy. You left. That relationship was abusive. You left. When you were in college, was that in Houston?
I was in Houston for a
Okay.
year.
And then did you finish college in Miami?
I did, I
Okay.
graduated in Miami.
Okay. So then you transferred to a school in Miami.
Right.
And then you got into another relationship with someone who you then had a child with. And then were you still in school when you had the child?
Yes, she
Okay.
went to school with me.
Oh, okay. So you got into a new relationship and you had a child, a little girl, and you were finishing out college there. So in Miami, you finished school, but in the meantime, things came to the surface that were abusive in your relationship. Is that the way
Yes,
it went? Okay.
and then I knew I couldn't stay there
Yeah.
because I said, "This is not the example I want my daughter to see."
But you knew that you had to finish school first to get your degree. Is that what you were thinking?
I always knew if I wanted to get a job because this is 2000 in, like, early 2000, 2003, 4, 5, so the mentality was you had to have a degree and
Yeah.
it will open more doors.
Yeah. So what was your degree in?
It was in management information systems and marketing.
Oh, okay. So that's a useful type of business degree that you could have taken anywhere. So you finished out your degree. And then how old was your daughter when you tried to leave this guy?
She was not even a year old.
Oh, okay. So did you
I
try
left
to end the relationship then before you graduated?
way before I graduated.
Okay. Okay. But you had to stay in Miami.
I did stay in Miami because I was first it was so that he could see her. Then when he left, it was okay, let me just finish out what I started.
But
And
then he
I
started to get into a stalker pattern.
when I left him in 2003, he did become a stalker and he ended up leaving the country in 2004.
Okay.
So he no longer was here.
Okay. When he was being a stalker, what was he doing?
He was everywhere I was, whether it was at the store or at school or he was just everywhere.
Was he trying to get you to come back?
That was his mentality. He thought that by doing that, it would bring me back, and I was like, "No."
And so what happened when he cut the wiring of your car? What was he got what, the brakes?
He just
What was he
I
trying to
couldn't
do?
who knows? I don't know
It
why he did it in a rage. He was very emotional, and I will never understand his thought process, why he did that.
so he just wanted to disable the car so you couldn't go anywhere? Or
I
you don't know.
I
So
don't
strange. We can never understand these types of behaviors. So obviously he was making it worse. Now you're seeing that he's irrational person. You don't want to be involved with him. And then he left the country?
Yes, he had to leave.
Okay.
'Cause I have a feeling some friends of mine called INS on him. He didn't have
Okay.
his papers,
Okay.
or the heat got really bad for him, meaning, like, the cops were looking for him. I don't know the complete story, but he ended up having to leave.
Okay.
So he went back to Trinidad, and he couldn't come back here to the States.
Okay.
And so I just that was it. That
Well,
was
it's
the end of that
probably
chapter.
fortunate for you, right?
At the time, yes. At the time, because I was never the type of person, "You can't see your children. I'm gonna use it against you." I see that many times with women. I was not like that. I was like, "We brought this child together. She needs both of us. We can be friends. We don't even have to be friends. We need to be respectful to each other. But this little girl will always be in our life. If you think about it, you will always be there for her birthdays. You will always be there for her graduation, for her marriage, for her grandkids. There's no point to be acting the way that you are." And he didn't get it. And so it was all or nothing. And so I was
Oh.
like, I'm
So
not
he
putting
couldn't do that. He couldn't just be the father unless he had you as well.
and I just said no. So we went to Trinidad. That's where he went. I never heard from him, but maybe once or twice, and his family saw he had a mom, dad, and 2 sisters, and they had kids my daughter's age because all of us were pregnant at the same time. So, his younger sister had her baby in March, then the older sister had her baby in April, and then my daughter was born in July. So, the cousins were all, like, same age, right? So, they could be together. However, the mentality of the family, they would always blame me for him leaving, and I was like, "You were there when he was hitting on me. You were there to talk to him and tell him to stop, and you were there to tell him, like, back off and just be mutual because she's not taking the child away from me. She's just removing herself for her
Mhm.
safety." And that was not the mentality. So for years, even when I decided in 2008 to move to Houston, I even let them know. I never hid where we were. You could always find us. And we moved here to Houston, where being in this place, giving stability to my daughter was really important.
So your parents were still in Houston when you came back?
So the house that I'm living in right now is their house. And I've been here since 2009. But I also was very fortunate, like, God opened this opportunity and was able to pay off their house in 2021. Going back to where we were, where I wanted stability because I hated moving, and I was having to move because my lease would always run out, and I didn't feel like living there.
Okay.
So, I didn't want that either for my daughter. And
Yeah.
with school, I was working retail and the hours were conflicting and it was just not healthy for both of us. So when I moved to Houston, I was able to give the structure, the stability, the just the same schedule. Now, there was a point where I worked in retail, so I was a pharmacy technician, so I was thinking to become a pharmacist.
Mhm.
That at that point, even when I worked long hours, my parents were here.
Yeah, which
And
makes a difference.
I always had this vision. I was like, when my daughter comes home, I want somebody to be home. So it was always my parents were here. So she never really could do very much. My mom always picked her up if I couldn't, take her to school if I couldn't. And she was in dance. She had
Oh.
structure.
So she had some of the things that you did not have.
Yes.
And your mom, she did learn to drive?
She did learn to drive when she moved to Houston
Okay.
because she said, "I wish I had learned to drive with your brother alive." But then
Yeah.
she learned to drive here in
Yeah.
Houston because it's a big city. So you got
Yeah.
to know how to drive.
Driving is such an essential thing for your autonomy and your self-esteem. It's really a big thing to be able to drive.
Oh, I learned that when I had my car accident in December and I had to walk everywhere.
Wow. Yeah, it's disabling. If you're in a city, you don't really need a car as much, but if you're anywhere that requires some distance to travel to get basic things, you really need a car. It's so interesting. I'm so glad you were able to extract yourself from the abusive relationships and your daughter was able to have stability. And so when you came back to Houston, you were probably, I'm going to guess, in your 20s,
I was in my
in
30s
your
when
30s. Okay.
I moved back to Houston.
Okay.
And it was different because at that time I had a failed marriage. That's why I came back.
Okay.
And that's when I decided at that point, no matter what happens,
So you were married to your daughter's father.
I was married to my
Okay.
daughter's father and I
And then
was
he
married.
went, but he went to Trinidad. How did you get out of the marriage?
I worked through a lawyer. And what they do is, in at least in the state of Florida, they have to show proof that they were looking for you. They were communicating and you refused. And I told them he was he's not here in the country, but they said we have to do these steps. And I don't know all of it, but I just know that when we went to court, the judge did ask, "Hey, where is the other party?" And the lawyer produced, we put an ad We did
Okay.
this.
Tried
We
to
did
find him.
this. Yeah, we did everything we could. He's not there, and so I was able to get out of the
Okay.
marriage.
That's good. All right. And then, so you left Miami then pretty quickly after that?
I was in Miami for another 4 years
Okay.
after the divorce,
Okay.
and then
Did you
I
say you
came
had another relationship after that?
I did. I had
Okay.
another relationship that had started right when I was about to leave Miami,
Okay.
and then I came back to Miami for 9 months, and it was weird going back because so much had happened before I left. So
Mm,
when I came back and when I left, I was sad to leave the relationship the way it was, but eventually we got divorced in 2011, and I look back and I'm like, I'm glad we didn't go back to Miami because in Houston, there was more job opportunities in there was more like I said, I was real big about stability for my daughter. And because my
mhm.
parents were there, I just could trust my parents.
Yeah. So this third relationship, did he come with you to Houston?
No,
No.
he did not. He
Okay.
was in Miami. He stayed there.
And then it just didn't work out.
It didn't work out because I was not on the same page as he was when it came to the relationship. And it was better that we didn't stay
Mhm.
together.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, I'm like, he would not have been somebody I would have dated. Like, I think about the person that I am today, I would not have been with either one of them. But if I had not been with at least my ex-husband, then I would not have had my beautiful daughter. And so
Right.
I'm always like, she's the best thing that happened from the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I think that's the truth is these relationships are meant to just be able to produce a child. And then that child has a purpose in the world. So you have been in Houston then since this time.
I have been in Houston since 2009, December,
Okay.
and I have not left. I have stayed here. I have had I dated 2 other men after that, and then I stayed single for a while, and especially when my daughter was in high school, I
Mhm.
realized so much I was spending time chasing this
Mhm.
dream. The one person that is about to leave that really needs me is my daughter, so I always felt bad, but then that's when I became involved in her high school. I made it a point that everybody knew me. So it was really funny. She couldn't breathe without someone sending me a picture because I had become friends with everybody. But I got to be home with her. Well, not home with her, but I put myself in a place where even the job that I had was 15 minutes away from her high school. So then that was the last job that I had, but I was at least 15 minutes away from her. I could drop her off, pick her up, whatever it was. I was really involved. And then when the pandemic happened, that's when I really started to focus more on the business and building it. But at
Yeah.
first, it was her.
Yeah. It sounds through your childhood and then through these relationships that were not healthy relationships that you really didn't have a lot of self-love going on.
No, no
And so
self-love.
somehow then once you put the focus on your daughter, it feels like she might have been a way for you to begin to see yourself as more important, as more valuable as a human being.
It was. It really was. So I was dating a gentleman for 3 years. Even he said, "You need to talk to somebody. You need to work on you."
Yeah.
And then when I finally did, 'cause it really hit when my daughter's father, my ex-husband, passed away, that wake-up call came and I said, "Okay, this is real. She doesn't have anybody else but
Yeah.
me, so I need to do
You
something,
need to put the oxygen mask on yourself.
and I need to figure out what's wrong with me because as I started to heal myself, our relationship started to get even stronger. I'm not saying
Yeah.
we have our moment,
Of course.
but it helped so much because then when she went away in 2021, her senior year, she was home And she had the opportunity that she could leave for 3 months to my cousin's house. The same cousin I mentioned in the beginning who lived in Miami that I was close to. So I told my daughter, I was like, "Why are you home? Why don't you go somewhere?" And it happened that my cousin said, "Yeah." So I bought a one-way ticket. And I said, "When you're ready, I'll bring you home. But obviously you have to be here for graduation." But
Yeah.
she was away for 3 months. And during that time, she was like, "You're not the same, mom. You're so different. What's made you so different?" And that was when I had started working with the mindset coach that I
Mm.
told her, "I'm working with the mindset coach. I think for you, compounded with a therapist, let's have you start working with a therapist," because she was like trying to understand and cope with her loss of her father.
Yeah.
And so that helped her. And then even last year, she just was like, "Whoa, you're still different. I can see it." And
Yeah.
so I've put in a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so now she's working
Yeah.
with a mindset coach.
That's so great. So, a couple of things. First, so then the father of your daughter passed away. And how did you get word about this? I guess the family was in touch with you?
His younger sister kept calling me, and I had a feeling. I was like, I kept getting some kind of sign, some kind of feeling the end is coming. I just didn't know who. And then the crazy story is I found out in the morning, but I didn't tell my daughter until dinner because I felt bad. I look back, I should have just had a talk with her. But
No, it's hard to know how to share information like that.
so a very close friend of mine said, "Hey, I want you to take her to Trinidad." Because he was like, "Can you take her to Trinidad?" And I was like, "I'm trying to figure it out." And he's, "I will take care of everything. You take her to Trinidad. And when you're there, you make it a point to take her everywhere that her father saw, because that's how she's going to get closure." And he
Mm.
was very adamant. He was like, whatever it is, he was going to take care of it. And so when we said we were coming, next thing you know, we had somewhere to stay. They accommodated the family of his side of the family, accommodated us. And then the tickets, even the passport. My daughter didn't have a passport. And like when I tell you that we got that passport, we got that passport at the last minute.
Ugh,
And we flew out, and then the next day was the funeral.
okay.
And I even said, I was like, "I want to see everywhere that he went." And they took us. Now, his sister had a problem with it, but I didn't care because I was like, "It's not about you, it's about
Yeah.
her." And we learned he never left the little town that he was in
Wow.
because when he came to Trinidad, he lost himself.
Yeah.
So he was in a tiny shack, and then he went to the beach. But if you look, it was always in just one area that he stayed. And it was very sad, but it was also my daughter saw, she can look back and say, "I saw it and I got the closure.
Did
I'm
she have
okay."
any contact with him over the years?
He may have called her 2 or 3 times. Whenever she would visit his side of the family in Miami, they would talk.
Mm.
But prior to that, the last conversation she said she had was in January of 2018, and she didn't like the way he talked to her, and she didn't talk to him until the first and last time of seeing him was at his funeral.
Okay. Wow. She never actually spent any time with him.
No. And this was also the time where I realized, I like, this is a generational story we're carrying. We need to stop this. Like, how
Yes.
do I do this?
Yeah.
Because my father lost his father at a very young age. I lost my brother. And then my daughter lost her father. And I was like, this is just not what I want the story
Yeah,
to keep
like you have
carrying
right.
over.
But sometimes
Let's,
that's why these things they have to hit you a few times until you make the decision to change it.
yes.
Interesting. And so I love the way that you're doing things for your daughter that you needed as a child and a young person, like the mindset coaching, the therapy, like you're oh, because you've learned those lessons, what
Yeah.
she needs.
I grew up in a Indian home, and when you said therapist, I'm like, "Oh, that's bad." But
Need those.
we don't need those, but I'm like, "No, we need those because as an entrepreneur, that pain, that self-doubt, those stories that you're carrying surface,
Yeah.
and they can hold you back from your blessings, from your success.
Yep.
Even having the conversation of success can be hard, or even your relationship with money. But if you
Yep.
can't understand the root of where this is coming from, you can't understand other things and
That's right.
why you can't see this. Like you look and see this person's successful and this person's successful. Why am I not? But don't compare, but it's more about what are you holding on to? And when
Exactly.
I started to work on that, I can identify. And with my daughter, I truly believe she can do so much greatness, but she has to see it herself. So, what's the best that I can do for her?
Yeah.
Put her in with someone who knows what they're doing. And because I
Right.
interview so many entrepreneurs and I've worked with few, it's easy for me to say, okay, this would be a good match. Even though in her mind,
Yeah.
she's, my mom doesn't know anything. And then later, she's, Mom, how did you know?
Isn't that great when they do that? Oh my gosh. So that's really cool. I think about this a lot because if only we could reach our young people after they've gone through the teenage years, because they're not quite ready developmentally, but in their 20s, to help them to be able to see things, the lessons that they've learned so far, and to implement them without having to go through all the pain of so many decades. But I don't know if that's possible, but wouldn't it be great if we could do that? But at least you're putting her on this great foundation so that as things happen to her over the decades, she'll know and she'll be able to assimilate the lessons more easily.
I would say 17, 18, because that's a hard period. When you're about to graduate, all these thoughts and feelings come surface.
Yeah.
I would say definitely working with someone, talking to a therapist, talking to a mindset coach, somebody to help you get past some of the things that you feel, right? Because
Yeah.
there's so much. But then once you're in college, and I'm learning from my daughter a lot of the self doubt, they really understand what's they're feeling a certain kind of way, they're adulting,
Yeah.
and if someone can direct them. So I am so glad that I'm able to do that, because if I
Yes.
had that when I was younger, things would look differently. But I also look at when we look at our journey of failure, our journey of even what we felt was not success,
Yeah.
would we go back and go through it again? And why? And I believe that I would go through my failures again. I would go through the journey that I went through because I couldn't be the person I am today in relating with others. So for some, now there are a few, there are very few failures that I'm like, I didn't need that one. But most of them I actually embrace and I would go through it again.
Yeah.
And that's crazy because you don't
Yeah.
hear that a lot with people, but I would say I will go through it again.
Yeah. I think people who are evolved enough to understand that at a higher level, they do say that they wouldn't change a thing about their lives, which is pretty interesting. So this has all brought you to now where you are now, and you're working with entrepreneurs. You've got this live show, and you're really in a great place. And I love what you said repetition and consistency is what has really brought you here. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I have been consistently going live streaming on a platform since 2020, April of 2020, and I have not stopped. Maybe I took a break for a week or here or there, but that's always been my motto. You take a week off,
Yep.
take a break, and then you come back. But I have always consistently been going live. And I realized that this is my passion, my love, helping entrepreneurs to share their story so we can learn from it
Yeah.
and then implement that strategy or even figure out maybe I don't like the industry I'm in, maybe I should pivot, or can I network with them? And it's
Yeah.
helped me build a business from it. Not
What do you
everybody's gonna be like that, but I
but I
mean,
love the idea that's one of the big fears people have going live. For people in business or for people even if you're just a regular person and you're instead of making a post on your social media, going live and just being you in the moment. It's, like, terrifying, but also so empowering. What is it about going live that's special? Why go live?
when I was building visibility and looking to build visibility, I was like, the only thing I know about is doing video. But
Mm.
if I go live, now what happens with Instagram is we can share communities because you are streaming from your platform, I'm streaming from mine. And then two, it's live. Like I didn't even think about it at the time, but I was like, anything can happen. I've had my daughter walk in, I had my mom walk in, anything is possible. And it's raw.
And it
I
doesn't
used
have
to
to
be,
be perfect. It's like a way of saying, "I'm not perfect. I'm imperfect, and this is human." It's like, what's real? This is real.
you know how many times anybody who's out there is, I don't know, because a video can be scripted
Yeah.
and can be set, and you can cut and edit, but in a live, it's I have said the wrong person's name, I have said the wrong words, I have offended somebody, not
Of
my trying to be it was on accident. I've
course.
cried, I've had my nose run, like, everything that's possible could happen has happened, and I'm embracing it,
Yeah.
but I've also learned video because some people are like, "I just have to do video because this is what everybody else is doing." No, video can actually help you just love yourself. Live
Can.
streaming can help you understand how amazing you are.
I love
Video
that.
can help you with being able to present your thoughts clearly, your ideas, your idols. But also, live streaming does that too, because I've done both. When I did my first master class, everybody was like, it was just like we were being live with you.
Yeah.
There was never a point or a doubt that this is something that I could do. So we are looking at video as I need to make time for it. I don't have the capacity to edit videos. I have to be so creative. You actually just need to be you and speak. If you look at your funnel of how you get people to come to you, the first thing is they find you on social media. And if you are out and about speaking, they'll find you on stage. Then they'll go to your social media. So they'll check out your posts. Then they'll see your video. Then they'll come and join on your live show so they can interact with you. Then they will do, if you're on LinkedIn, you can do an audio room. Then they'll come on stage and talk to you. Then they'll get on a Zoom with you. And that's the journey that we sometimes forget. I wish someone told me this last year or years before, but this is the way that we as people are.
Yeah.
If I think about everybody that I have interviewed, that is the journey I went through. And then I
Yeah.
ended up working with them after I interviewed them.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy the connections you make when you're not afraid to put yourself out there.
Absolutely. Or if you're just trying to figure out, like, what do you want to do?
Yeah, and
What
figuring it out publicly, there's something magical about that, isn't there?
It is. I've taken everybody on a journey. If you look at my posts, if you look at when you first open my Instagram, it seems like it's so perfect. It was never like that. It was a hodgepodge hot mess. And you scroll down, you will see it is a true journey. I've never hid my journey. Even on LinkedIn, when I went live, I never hid that I used boxes. I had a hair tie. I just was like, this is me. And I was always scared that people were going to judge me. But I said, no, this is exactly how others feel. Take that stigma
They
away
do.
and just show up as you. And those who have been part of this journey for a while, love it.
Yep. Oh, I think it's massive. It's such a great thing. It's a fear I've been wanting to overcome. I have not gone live, and you're making me wanna do it. I'm thinking about doing it today, but I
Just
love
do
I
it.
know, just do it.
If you
Huh?
want, we can go live together just so
We
you can get
should.
the jitters away, but
Okay. Okay,
You should
we
just
could.
know when you start that was one of the things when I started bringing on guests that I would talk to them before. I would listen to the intonation. So when we
Yeah,
went live, I would always say, "It's just you and I.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
We're just talking to me." That you and I
right.
remember for one of my guests, we had like 256 people on. That is exactly how we carry that conversation. She
Yeah,
never looked at the numbers. She
yep.
just was like, "It's you and I." And that was
I love it. It's just so empowering. Like, it's amazing how you could go from somebody who was so insecure as a little girl to somebody who's now so empowered and empowering other people.
it is crazy. Like I still feel oh, that you how do you know I'm not insecure? They're both my
Well, maybe you
face.
still have some of those. I don't we all have insecurities at times, right? I think
This
it's a rare
absolutely.
person who has no insecurities ever. That's extremely rare.
I would say that so when I started, I was in my late 30s, and so now I'm in my 40s, and so the weight gain, the hormonal changes and everything, and the same things that some hate about, "Oh, look at I'm too puffy or I'm too this." I'm like, "Think about that. You're feeling it, but you're still showing up and embrace it and talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Hey, I
Yeah.
look a little puffy today," or "Today the grays are coming out, but we're gonna make it look beautiful."
Yeah.
Or just saying I had a bad day. My daughter went off to college and I'm sitting here missing her.
Yeah. Just talking about it, putting it out there. I think we get stuck, especially through the pandemic. We get stuck in our small little pond and we don't realize that there are so many meaningful connections to be had just from putting yourself out there because there might be people who judge you. I think those who judge us the most harshly are those who are really judging themselves. And
We're
they're,
our harshest critics.
yeah, that's
There's
true.
nobody
That's
gonna be
true.
more than that.
That's very true. There's nobody who could,
There's
there's nobody who
nobody
could
out there.
criticize me harder than I criticize myself. That's very true.
And I also learned that small thinking. I was listening to Joel Osteen who's talked about that. And he's like, why do you ask just to make it to your paycheck to paycheck? Why don't you ask that you are able to not just be able to pay your bills, but be able to pay for others?
Yes.
Like you need to treat that little cold of yours of a blessing that you're asking for.
Yep.
And whenever I catch myself wanting to think small, I have to stop myself and
Yeah.
say, stop. You are meant for more.
Yeah.
What that more looks like to you, you define that, but you are meant for more. And as much as people talk about it, think about it. If you're just asking, I just want to be able to get this one job. Why do you want that job? What will that one job be able to help you do? And
Hmm.
when you start to define and drive into it, then you realize, wait, this one job can help me be able to go and provide snacks and build out
Right.
workshops for the kids at CPS,
Right.
which then can open doors into maybe somebody in management might see your capacity and make you a director. But like we need to start thinking that this is
Yeah.
just for now. What
But I
could
love
this
that.
now do
What you're
more?
saying really speaks to having an abundance mindset because so many people are like, oh, I'm afraid to be too successful, or it's not right for me to earn more money because there's so many poor people in the world. But thinking about it that way prevents you from making a difference for other people. Like having more means you can give more. And why play small? Why not go huge and be able to make a large impact and help more people in the world? I always think about that. I would love nothing more than to make massive amounts of money. And the first thing I would do would be to make sure that my family, everybody that I love, is taken care of and to share with people who need it. I think most people do think that way.
They
And
do, but they get scared. Like even
yeah,
if you're listening to this episode to until now, understand that it wasn't easy for me to think like that, but it's understanding, okay, this is the massive goal, being able to do more for others, whether it's paying their bills or providing jobs for them. Okay, now let's go back, work backward. You might have heard that work backwards. and implement small things to get there. So for you, if you're like, okay, if I post 3 times this week, at the end of the week, I'm going to treat myself to a binge watching on Netflix or just doing nothing for the rest of the Saturday. And treat yourself like that because then you will get to that. You will
Mm.
appreciate, hey, because I'm doing these small things for myself, now I can do others things for others because we feel bad to do for ourselves first.
Yeah.
And then when you do that for others, it's whoa.
So you reward yourself. Number one, it's going to motivate you to complete your goals, but then also it will teach you that rewarding yourself is has so much value and help you to then want to spread that for
Yes.
others.
And even the reward is not like you're buying anything. You're just
Yeah, just
saying,
something
I'm just taking a
that you
walk.
love, something you love. I love that. Oh my gosh, wow. You're so wise. Like, I just love
But
that hearing the whole journey of how you've gotten to where you are, because you're really like a lovely person. You really have
thank
a
you.
light, like a really beautiful light. So, can you tell us what you think are the biggest lessons that you've learned in this life?
The biggest lessons I've learned from this life was life is short. I learned very young, life is short. And you have to make the most of this time. The other thing that I learned is believing in yourself. Like, how do you do that? We did an exercise because I'm part of Night Owl Nation, and we were told to write our story, like all the things that helped in our impact. And if you realize in your life, you actually got through some stuff that you didn't think was possible. So the moment that you say, I don't know if this is possible, look back. Look
Yep.
back how you got through some of the stuff you got through. And then you have the proof is there. Believe that you can get through it because you did it already, maybe
Yes.
15 times. And then the last thing that I would share is when you step out of your comfort zone, what an amazing feeling it is. That fear that was holding you back, that anxiety that was holding you back, the story that was holding you back. And you recognize it wasn't your story. It was just something that you latched onto and just
Mm,
kept carrying and carrying. Then you realize, oh, I can do so much more. Oh, why was I thinking that way? These are the 3 things that I would share that I've learned that have impacted my life in just 43 years around the sun, and I have so much more to learn.
yeah. Wow. Wow. Just amazing. I can't wait to
Mm.
hear what more you learn and to just share more nuggets with us because that's so wise. So, what about the blessings? How have you been the most blessed?
Every day I wake up is a blessing, and the blessings have come from always being able to since I don't have a steady paycheck, always having food, always having a place to
Mm,
stay, always having the bills paid. I'm very spiritual, so I will say that it took me some hard times to recognize, follow God's path, follow the message, the plan that He has. Even in the moment, you're like, but why?
yeah.
Because the why, so it can help you prepare for what He has in store for you. So if you look at your journey of life, you had to go through something to be able to do what you're doing today. So if you are a chef today, there may have been many of times where you were put in situations like you were like, why do I need to do this? Why do I need to handle this? Because if you're a chef at a restaurant, you are running the kitchen. You're running the orders and making sure that they taste the way that they should at the temperature that they should with the demands of the requests. So think about that in your everyday life, what you're doing. For example, going live, I look back at all of the series of things that I've done helped me get here. This personality, this developing, this all just didn't happen overnight. It seemed like it just fell into place, but it was a series of events. And what does that look like for you where you are today?
Yeah. Because everything you've done has skills and talents and showcases things about you that are special, even if they don't seem special in the moment, because that's what
Mhm.
special is. Special is made from the ordinary.
That's
All of
right.
those little ordinary things add up to something amazing. I
Yes.
love it. Oh my God. All right. I'm going to ask you the big question. Just say the first thing that comes to your mind. What is the most important thing?
My daughter.
That was just snap, quick.
But that's the most important person. Most important
Yes.
thing is believing in yourself.
Yeah. That is beautiful. This has been a really special conversation. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing the most traumatic and the most beautiful things about your life with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
It's been great.